Shalom all, Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School, KosherTorah.com. Again, bringing you another class with this topic specifically being a continuation of what I began the last time, secrets of Genesis. As I mentioned in the previous class, anytime you want to come to a discussion of the topic of Bereshit, Genesis, the beginning chapters of the Bible, if you will, you must understand them within a proper context, or, as we've seen from thousands of years of history, they will forever be subject to multiple layers of misunderstanding and thus misinterpretation. Let's put some facts right at the beginning, okay? Remember, the books that we call the Bible, remember we discussed in the last class, the Bible's not a book, it's a compilation of books written a long time ago by peoples of a culture very far away. You know what I'm making a pun with there. Now, what I'm saying is that ancient Semitic mentality was very different from how we look and understand things today. So when the stories of the Bible were written, they were never ever meant to be taken or understood literally as people do today. In our previous lesson, we discussed the issue of the 6 days of creation and how that is viewed and understood. And even when you go into the original Hebrew and you look at just the first word, Bereshit, the word Reshit is translated as beginning, but it really doesn't mean that. Because when people look at in the beginning, you're thinking that you're talking about a time sequential. But if that were the case, then the actual Hebrew word to be used would have been Rishon, or Rishonah, Bereshonah, at first. But no, Reshit, like it says later in many verses in the Bible, Reshit Chochmah, the beginning of wisdom and the like. This is not a sequential in time, but a layer of order. What we know and understand about the first chapter of Genesis, and this is actually echoed in both the Gemara and the Kabbalah, is that the entire first chapter of Genesis, which we know explains an order of creation very different from what picks up in chapter 2 of Genesis. All of chapter 1 is not necessarily speaking about a sequential of time order in the creation of physical space. If you remember, we discussed that there were actually 3 dimensions understood in, if you will, ancient Torah, space, time, and the third being nefesh, referred to in the Sefer Yetzirah. We call it consciousness, mind, the power of mind. We want to talk about God. Remember, God has no form, no semblance of form. No man shall see God's face. I shall make no other gods upon me. Actually, if you look at the original Hebrew of the 10 Commandments, it says no other gods before me. It says Lo hi Elohim acharim al panai. Do not put out a God upon my face. Face, of course, is a symbolic reference, meaning any kind of mental construct that we apply to God, any kind of form or structure is fundamentally flawed. God must always be the abstract absolute. Essentially, God is what we will call the universal mind, collective consciousness. That essentially is what Yud Ke Vav Ke actually means if you look at it. But now let's get back to Genesis 1. Yud Ke Vav Ke is not there at all. Is it? It's always really, honestly, better to refer to God as an it than the appellations that we do so in our metaphorical language of he or she. The Bible was written to speak in the language of the everyday person. And that is why it is layered. That is why it is coded. Even the likes of Sir Isaac Newton, a big famous scientist, spent decades trying to decipher the secret codes that the Kabbalists have always known were there, and he made a lot of effort to do so. He wrote a lot of material on Kabbalah, and those records, those papers, if I'm not mistaken, are still available today and presently available in Israel. So no one understands. When we speak of Elohim, like we discussed in our previous class, we're speaking of the laws of nature, the natural way of things. And we associated that Chinese concept of the Tao with our understanding of Torah, recognize that they're essentially one and the same. To the point that when we use the Jewish term halakha, often described as Torah law, religious law, ultimate or true Kabbalah, halakha, ultimate true halakha is essentially the universal way, the way that we live. Anyone who wants to truly understand the Torah must look at halakha, sorry if I said the wrong word before, halakha, the law, if you will, it really means the way to go. You must look at it as an indigenous, natural, universal, oriental, psychic, spiritual way. And remember, all of Torah is essentially oriental. It is not Western. To this very day, when we refer to Sephardic congregations, we refer to them as Edot Mizrach, congregations of the East. Or if you look in translation, they'll refer to it as the congregations of the Orient. So yes, Torah is essentially oriental. Now, understand, the entire Torah, as you know, is based upon agricultural law, all the laws of the land, etc. That is because the Torah was meant to be understood naturally. Everything revolves around our intimate association relationship with nature. We were meant to live in the land. We were meant to have a natural flow of society. We weren't even supposed to need a structured government. Do you remember when King Saul was first, made king? What did Shmuel, the prophet, say? That people were rejecting God. How can you reject God by wanting an organized government? Isn't organized government part and parcel of being normal and sophisticated as a people? But for the people of God, bonded to the land, who had a psychic understanding and a connection of the flow of natural way of order, halakha, there would be no need for such centralized authority. And the wise warnings of the prophet Shmuel proved true. It was the downfall of the nation. We know what happened with King Saul. His entire monarchy collapsed. We see what happened with King David, with nothing but controversy. We look today in modern day America, we see the controversy going on with the administrations, I say that in plural, of Mr. Trump today. Previously, there were all the arguments with regards to Mr. Obama before him. Before that was all the problems with Mr. Bush, and on it goes. This is stable, solidified government? Really? Well, this is what we were warned against. And if history or nature is any prediction of the future, you can rest assured that whatever administration we have in the United States, or for that matter any other country, is going to be as naturally tumultuous, simply because that's just the way of things. The only thing that really matters, which is the foundation of the Torah, the foundation of the natural way, the underlying message of halakha, is the importance of that third dimension of mind, consciousness. This is why the Torah always speaks about having God in one's heart. You never hear anything about putting God in your mind. Remember the Shema Yisrael? You shall love the Lord your God with all your mind. Doesn't say that. All your thoughts. Doesn't say that. It says with all your heart. These words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart. Heart is a deeper inner essence of the reality of our being, which is leading me into the topic of what we need to discuss now. Genesis 1 speaks of the creation of Elohim, the natural order. But the natural order, like I said, is three-dimensional. We already know space-time. That third dimension, consciousness. When you read Genesis 1, you must understand that Genesis 1 is actually talking about the development and evolution of consciousness. 7 days of creation. Is it any coincidence that that first pasuk, Bereshit bara Elohim et Hashemayim et haaretz, right? 7 words. And the 7 words have 28 letters, the secret of power, koach. The next pasuk, 14 words, 7, 14, double. 7 plus 14 is 21, the secret number of the name Ehyeh. Ehyeh, as we know, in many associations Kabbalistically, corresponds to that realm called the world of Beri'ah, or the Sefirat Binah. Also corresponding to that domain called Elohim, which was the creator of the two lower dimensional planes of heaven and earth. All of these things are secretly concealed in the codes right in Genesis. Continue in the counting of numbers, if you will, the number of words. The next few psukim, 6, and then again 12, and then again, when we speak about the creation of light, 13. Go and look at the creation of light. 13 words in that verse, pasuk. 13, as you know, is the gematria of Echad, unity. And what is so unique about the unity that brings about the creation of the first day in light? Well, look at the entire scenario. If you look at the story of the creation, it speaks about, we discussed this last week, about the gap between verses 1 and 2, that there is now a void, there's tohu, there's bohu, which if you read Ramban, Nahmani, and later Kabbalah, I will tell you it's speaking about something that the Greeks called the chiyul or the chiyuli, what we call the prima matter. Essentially, it's the same thing as the Adam Kadmon concept. I don't want to go there right now. That's not my point. I'm focused on the issues of consciousness. You see, the whole process of creation, it's not completely described. You remember, we spoke about the creation of light, that we all know. What about the creation of the darkness? What about the creation of the water and the depths that is spoken of in the verses 2, 3, and 4? Right? You'll notice, where does it say that? It doesn't. Question for you, which came first, light or darkness? And now let's remember associations. Which comes first, male or female? Anyone who would ever say male is fundamentally wrong by just looking at the order of the natural way. No male on this planet ever came forth other than being born. What about Adam being created from the earth? Yeah, well, you go look in the Zohar, and you'll see Rabbi Yehuda Fatih himself quotes that Adam and Eve, specifically Adam, had spiritual parents. He had a mother and a father. And that the concept of the creation of his form on the physical world was only that. But that which we call his soul, his essence, was already there and came from a higher domain. So understand, darkness comes before light. You want to associate that with some metaphors? Let's throw in one of my favorite from the Orient, the yin and the yang. Excuse me. And just for my fundamentalist friends out there who don't like me quoting anything that's not ethnically Jewish, something, deal with it. Because our Torah teaches us, Ezihu Hacham, who is truly wise, one who learns from everyone. We embrace and accept truth wherever it is found. So when you study some of the teachings from around the world, you know and recognize that they are just other forms of our Torah, what we call the Torah in exile. So the concept of yin and yang is valid for our discussions in a Torah circle. You don't like it? Tough, deal with it. Yin, yang. In Torah, we call it Ma and Ben, Za and Nok, Tiferet, Malchut, heaven and earth. Getting to the point where we're going now. Which came first? You go study your Kabbalah. The darkness comes first before the light. The female always comes before the male. That is the truth of things. That is the underlying secret why the female is always on a higher spiritual plane than the male, and why in our inverse and reversed world, male has taken dominance. Because all the while that the male takes dominance spiritually, we have what's called the exile of the Shechina. Now, the concept of the Mahadash, coming to rectify the fallen female, that's all we found in Kabbalah. You can go into my courses in the Otzrut Chaim, we discussed that in detail. But remember what the purpose is. The purpose of the male to bond with the fallen female is to elevate the fallen female. Fallen female is referred to as Ben, or the lower Hey. Job and role of the Vav, the Ma, is to bring it up to be again the higher Hey, corresponding to the name of Elohim and Ehyeh, the world of Binah and Beri'ah. So understand that. All of chapter 1 in Genesis is all the descriptions of the evolution of human consciousness. The 7 days of creation are, if you will, the 7 Sefirot, if you will. And as such, this is actually echoed in the Gemara, in which there's a discussion. When was the world created? Was it in Nisan, possibly, or Tishrei? It goes back and forth, and the Kabbalah reveals actually the world was created in both. The spiritual world was created in Nisan, and the physical world was created in Tishrei. Now remember, this is metaphorical, symbolic language. We're not putting a time stamp on any actual creations. But we are speaking of this higher realm. If you notice right away, verse 2, Ha'aretz haita tohu v'bohu. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then the Aretz was tohu v'bohu. What happened to the Shemayim? We don't speak about anything happening up there. It's gone from the creation story. Well, it's not. This is what you must understand when we deal with the relationship of consciousness as the underlying dimension of all things. Understand that. We speak of the heavens and the earth. Using Kabbalah speak, it's referring to 2 different dimensional planes called Asiyah and Yetzirah. All right? Normally, we think of worlds being on top of one another like this. But Yetzirah and Asiyah is probably better to refer to like this, being side to side with one another. And they fluctuate with one another. And that is just the order of things. Our physical universe, anywhere that you can look up into outer space, this is all Asiya. And it's not just this dimensional plane. As you know, we discussed previously, modern science is very well aware of those dimensional planes called dark matter and dark energy. Well, in these dimensional realms, there exist planets which are inhabited, which have intelligent beings on it, many of whom are far more advanced than us. All of this interacts in a greater reality. Think about it, if you will, from our human point of view. We can look at, say, something like an anthill, something like insect life, any kind of life that we consider to be less than our own. How aware of us are they? Probably not at all. How much do they care about us? Probably not at all. How much do we have an influence on their lives? I'm talking about little ants in an anthill. Probably not at all. And yet we exist simultaneously in the same dimensional plane. And you could say, yeah, I can go to an anthill and stomp on it. Well, I'm sure there are probably alien civilizations out there that can probably just swat the earth as you would scratch, an itch on your nose here. But whatever, that's not the point. The point is that there are multiple realities, even in our physical plane. Understand this. Now we can go and look into that anthill and learn everything about them. How much of our presence, our observations, our knowledge and understanding of that anthill do you think is shared by those ants? They might be aware of something there. They might have some semblance of consciousness of something going on. It's not every day that I actually talk to ants to ask them these questions, so I don't have those answers. But we have far more understanding. Understand and know that there are races that are doing to us what we're doing to the anthill. Some of them may be good, bad, whatever. That's not the point of our speculation. When we come to understanding Genesis, the darkness comes before the light. And don't think that darkness is bad. If you remember, it says God created the light, separated the light from the darkness, and called them both good, because they're both part of the same whole. That's why when you look at the example again of the diagram of the yin and the yang, you'll notice it's a central concentric whole, 2 parts of the same which join together. That is what you must understand about the nature of these higher dimensional planes. So whatever is out there in the Asiyatic universe, in all these dimensional realms, this is still part and parcel of the earth. Now let's talk about Shemayim. Shemayim is the dimension of the realm of the mind, the realm of heavens. It manifests itself in other dimensional forms, which we can refer to as personified emotions. Those who ever go into the meditative state, the first thing that must be overcome before one can get into a point of pure clarity is the state of tumultuous emotions. This is referred to in the Bible, in the prophecies, and not the prophecies, but in the vision state of Ezekiel, later of Eliyahu and Navi. It's referred to as the storm. Whenever you try to whenever you try to calm your mind, before you get into a cloud, you go into this tumultuous period of thoughts, ramming your consciousness to the point you just can't get quiet. You have to learn to calm the storm. We teach this in all meditative traditions. And then you go into the state called the cloud, all right? It's this blurry nebulousness where just nothing is clear. And all of a sudden, start getting hit with strikes of appear like lightning bolts, fire. These emotional things which come rising up within you, giving you feelings of fear and unworthiness that make you run in terror. That is the tumultuousness of the Asiyatic world that you've just tapped into. And you must learn to calm those fears. That's why we use the name Yud-Ke Vav-Ke with all the associations with each and every letter as our anchor of consciousness to penetrate through what we call here the three levels of the klipot. So we're talking about this level called heaven, this level called Yetzirah. We're talking about transcending. But remember, I just give you a meditative expression of this, talking as if you're going up the ladder. What is referred to in the Bible as the Sulam Aliyah. That's what we teach you, the Aliyah school of Kabbalah. Understand now that as you go up, like in an elevator, you have whole floors of existence at each and every level. Some people will get off at every floor and hang out and do whatever they got to do. Those are the domains of which we speak of. The Zohar speaks about these domains and everyone says, wow, what's on those domains? I'm so curious, I want to know. This is not a curiosity game. This is about expanding consciousness, and the focus is going up, not to the sides. Do you want to go to the sides? We can talk about the Halakha Darabanan body, we call the astral body. And you can interact with many different entities, and you can go to many different places psychically. Hey, they do it to us, why not us do it to them? But be careful, because we know that in this Asiyatic world of ours, remember, it's almost the inverse and opposite of Kedusha. Almost everything here is in reverse. Almost everything here is so opposite of what we call holiness, that for you to go out into these domains unprepared will expose you to things that can be significantly dangerous to your soul. So this is why we do not seek to interact with other Asiyatic entities in these parallel dimensions, simply because we recognize their level of consciousness is not at that which we call Kedusha. They're out there, they're doing their thing, whatever that is. I'm not going to get into details because I don't want you going there. This is why we refer to any type of activity within the Asiyatic world as Kabbalah Ma'asit. Ma'asit from the word Asiya, and we say that it's forbidden because it's dangerous. It's kind of like, if you will, going into a foreign city, not knowing the language, not knowing the culture, not knowing anything, with the optimistic hope that everybody's going to love you and welcome you, right? Go try to take a plane, go land in Beijing or some other major city somewhere outside of your comfort zone where you don't know anything, and see what happens to you, right? This is what it's like going into that Asiyatic realm, and why we do not mess with these types of entities. They're out there, we acknowledge their presence, but we do not seek interactions with them because they have powers, if you will, not mystical, magical, but they exist in the dimensional realms. Some will endeavor to coerce them to try to work in consciousness or close to it to manipulate other people. That's what we call magic, dark magic, bad stuff. Well, think about this. Let me give you an example of why and how this is bad. If I come to you, for example, I put a gun to your head, stick them up. No, okay, you give me your money, whatever you do. And then I take the gun away, turn around, and I say, don't you come after me. What do you think and what do you think something's going to happen to you? The minute you turn your back, the guy's going to come and bash you from behind. Whenever you manipulate other entities with holy names or what we call offering them things, this is very bad, because the minute you turn your back, or if you will, disconnect your focus, they come after you. If you, for example, I'll give an example of why it's very dangerous to do these types of offerings. You see this very common in certain types of Santeria and voodoo and other types of practices where they offer things to the spirits. Well, if you went out to the wild and you met, say, a big burly grizzly bear, and you say, oh, what a sweet little bear, let me give him some food. You give him some food. The bear's going to eat very nicely from your hand. What happens when you run out of food? Well, the bear might just eat your hand and then the rest of you. That's what happens. These entities are of that type of psyche. That's why to mess like this, to get involved, is very bad. No matter what you offer them, they're going to want more, and they will take it. They can attach to your soul and follow you from lifetime to lifetime. That's what we call a psychic tap, psychic vampire. Kabbalah Ma'asit, dealing with the earth level entities, all that type of stuff, Santeria, voodoo, and all the rest, very, very bad. Anybody who deals and dabbles with it knows what happens to them. They get taken over. Many women get involved with these things. They don't realize that they conjure and invoke a male soul, a male entity, which literally takes them as a wife, as a sex slave, and destroys their lives, uses them. And the indigenous cultures, these people at least acknowledge that, yeah, they're married to such and such an entity. They do this all the time, but never for their own good. Understand now that this domain of which I speak is the parallel dimensions of Asiya and Shemayim, that other level which we call Yetzirah. There are other entities there, what we can call, I guess, higher entities. These act as conduits for higher dimensional planes. We call them malachim, angels. But as enumerated in both the Zohar and Rambam, that you will find that there are many different types of these entities whom we call angels. Now, there are traditional good old guardian angels, but they're not technically malachim, right? We have to be careful with the usage of our words. Malachim are messengers. Essentially, you and I are messengers every time we do something that we're passing on light and doing good. But these other entities, we can call them the Seraphim, the Hayot, right? All of these different types, they're different races of beings that exist in a different dimensional plane. They do not exist indigenously at that plane called the Asiyatic, even though there are messengers that do. We refer to in the Torah about a group called the Bnei Elohim. These are the ones who came down and took the daughters of men. I always question if these entities were these abstract beings of light. We discussed that in our previous class. Why would they in any which way be attracted to human women? That would have been such a lower form of life. Think about this, all right? How many of us look at lower forms of life? Let's go back to our anthill. All right, let's go back to insects. How many of you say, wow, that's a real hot little insect. Man, I'd like to get it on with that little ant. Oh boy, look at that female mosquito. Hubba, hubba. Really? I don't think so. So if these entities are such higher dimensional planes than us, why and how would they be attracted sexually? It doesn't make sense, now does it? But there's a point. It's known. Even Rabbi Soloveitchik spoke about this, that ultimately this group called the Bnei Elohim were an actual humanoid, physical race of entities, and they were kind of like us. We learned that they were, if you will, the members of that race from the pre-Adamic civilization, who, I don't know, maybe we can call them Atlanteans or call them whatever terms we want to today. These entities went to the stars and they lived there because of whatever known reasons in the pre-Adamic worlds, that was their choice and destiny. Our Masorah, our traditions teach us they were not the first who have evolved on our earth and gone beyond our earth, that there were other races, non-humanoid, that have done the same. So our earth, according to our understanding, has been the birthplace of many civilizations that have since evolved, not only on our earth, off our earth into other physical dimensions, but also into higher dimensional dimensions, if you will. Essentially, when we speak of our own future, that which we call Olam Haba, the world to come, what happens after Mashiach comes, right? We elevate our world. Then we have what's called the world to come. What is the world to come? Did you ever notice one of the fundamental concepts of Judaism is resurrection? Resurrection is that we come back down here. What the hell do I need back here for? I finished down here. I want to go to heaven. I want to be spiritual. What do I need this physical body for anymore? Why do I got to come back? And this is a fundamental concept of our Torah. Why? Circle, yin and yang, sof ma'aseh v'machshava tefillah. This dimensional plane right here is the heart of things. And when we recognize that the purpose of consciousness isn't so much to go up, but to bring down, and that up and down are two parts of the same cycle, then you're beginning to understand the meaning of heavens and the earth, and the dimensional entities that exist in one, and the dimensional entities that exist in the other, and we all interact with one another. That which we traditionally think of as angels and malachim, they exist in higher Asiyatic dimensions, if that is what they are, because their consciousness has evolved. When they travel to Earth, they don't need flying saucers and spaceships. They travel through mind. Remember we spoke about that Halakha Darabanan, astral projection? This is why many of these entities, when they appear in the mind. You might see an energetic or sense an energetic. I don't know if you actually see it. Sometimes it can be seen, sometimes not. But what you can then have is a communication between that energetic presence and your conscious mind, or unconscious mind, as the case may be, and you feel a semblance of a presence, which will then take a form in your mind based upon what your mind is able to perceive. That is not the true form of the entity. Some will see these entities as angels. Some will see it, for example, if they are Christian, if they are Catholic, they might interpret the image to be the Virgin Mary. If you're a Protestant, it might be the image of Yeshu. If you're of other religious faiths, you'll see within the context, the cultural context of your mental construct. We need to transcend all of these things to get to the ultimate truth. That's what we, of course, teach. So understand this actual real domain, actual real extraterrestrials. If you look even in all these, in quote, kidnapping sort of stories, most who talk about them being kidnapped by the in quote grays, it's all happening psychically. Some people say it's happening to me physically. I'm sure that's what they believe. But I'm sure upon appropriate examination, we'd find that nothing physical is happening at all, in spite of what they believe. And people say, I go up to their spaceship. I'm sure you do. We read about that also in Rabbi Yehuda Patia. He says that these entities, these Asiatic entities that like siphon off of us. Oh, did I forget to call them by their correct names? In our Torah tradition, we refer to them as Shadim, and the Islamic tradition, they call them jinn. Okay? They all siphon. Whenever you're messing around with Asiatic entities, you're messing around with entities that have no respect for human life. You say, well, they respect God. Yeah, of course they do. But they look at you and I pretty much as energetic entities, or if you will, food. That's exactly how they look at us. They don't give a darn how religious you are, how spiritual you are. You are an energetic source of energy, and they suck energy out of you like you drinking from a straw. And especially the female, because the females, their scepter has their real source of energy. That's why they siphon off from females. That's why you'll find a lot of occultic interactions, spiritual stuff goes to the female. And why the female today is under such terrible psychic attack. Everything female today is under such terrible psychic attack by entities that live. They siphon off the energy. That's just the way of nature. That's why we have the halachot that we do. So just to wax practical for a quick little second here. In our Torah tradition, as I'm sure you know. Our rabbis innovated laws, things like never having any physical contact with a member of the opposite sex other than those which are permitted, members of the family, etc. No casual huggy kissy kind of stuff, which is so common, especially here in Europe. All right? This type of stuff is very dangerous. Even to be physically alone with a member of the opposite sex in certain times, we call this yichud, right? The other touching stuff is called nagia. Very, very energetically bad. Should never do this. No one comes out of that unscathed energetically. Now you could say, well, in our social cultures and stuff, this is very common. I know there's a lot of things common in social cultures, which bottom line is energetically very unbalancing. Everybody knows this. People want to shrug their shoulders. I'm more socially conscious than I am energetically conscious. Fine, go live your life. What do you want from me? I'm not here to tell you what to do or how to do it. But if you want to align with energy, you better start doing things properly. I don't think the laws of nature. You cannot deny the essences of energy. The other entities around us, they see it. We need to become more consciously aware and see it too. That's what you must understand. At any time you try to justify, even one time, hey, why don't I just take my finger, stick it into the electric socket just one time? I mean, how bad could it be? I take a gun, shoot myself in the head one time. How bad could it be? Look, remember we said we began understanding the laws of nature. Everything is natural. This is what universal halakha is all about. Every culture that deals with true spiritual balance understands and knows these things. There are other entities, and they watch us energetically. Some good, some bad. I'm not going to get into all the different realms of the malachim, what they do, how they do it. We stay focused on our path. Our path is to understand and know going up, going down. Remember Jacob's vision, saw the angels go up and down? That is what this is all about. We live in a much greater reality, a much greater world. The whole nature of the original creation of light out of darkness was like a birthing process. That light is the light of consciousness, awareness. It is the birth and development of the revelation of mind. Again, consciousness out of the unconscious. That's essentially what the whole process of creation is all about. Our path, our destiny and purpose is the cultivation, the development, the expansion of consciousness. Everything is to become greater aware. That is the light of day one. And if you remember the rabbis, they said that light of day one was put aside for the righteous, for the world to come. Enlightenment. That is what it is. It's not physical light. That's symbolically created on day 4. The light of mind, the light of consciousness. We can tap into this or right from the beginning. All you have to do is follow the halakha, the way, the natural way. If you are Jewish and you're observing Torah, it's not enough that you just pick up a little book of the law code and say, I'm going to observe halakha, I'm going to do Shabbat and kosher, and I'm just going to follow the leaders like a mindless robot. You'll never accomplish anything. The Ariel teaches every halakha, every law in Judaism has layers of consciousness to it. We call it pshat, remez, drash, sod. And at every level, you must feel the essence of it, experience the knowledge of it. This is the great secret of how we observe halakha. Everything is an expression of an indigenous reality. Whether we're dealing with the laws of Shabbat and our balance with nature, whether we're talking about kashrut, the allowance to eat animal flesh, but the removal of the soul, which is the fundamental of kosher killing, kosher slaughtering. And the law states that the kavanah, the focus, the mind of the shohet must be pure at that time, because his mind energy at the moment when he is doing this must be as pure as the removal of the animal energy, or it's not considered completely kosher. That's one of the reasons why I don't eat meat. I don't trust any shochet out there to have that proper devotion to nature, to animal souls. That's me. I'm not going to tell you what to do. All the laws of family purity, the balance, the harmony, these things have a reality to them. They have an energetic force to them. You want to calibrate, you want to get in alignment with heaven to ascend. Your energy has to be properly aligned and balanced within you. The only way to balance your energy within you is obviously you start with the outside world and get your physical world correct. When your physical world is correct, then you can work in the internal world. This is why we have the paths that we do. So for those of you who want to say, I'm going to go live my life and do whatever I want, yada, yada. Oh, great. Oh, don't bother me, right? I will guarantee you one thing. You will ascend. You're going to get to the highest level, guarantee it, no matter what. It might take 1,000,000 years, or 2 or 3 or 4. It might take thousands of lifetimes, a lot of pain and suffering. But think about it like this. We're at the bottom of the Sephirotic ladder at Malchut. God's at the top. Trying to get that right in the camera there. God's going to bring us up, no matter what. There's that magnetic pull from below to above to evolve us. In the Sephirotic tree, you see there's a right column and a left column. Well, guess what? You want to take the easy path? You can take the easy path. You want to take the hard path? You can take the hard path. But remember, there's always that magnetic draw, which is pulling you towards enlightenment. You could choose whichever way you want to go, right? You want to take the easy, quick way? Cool, it's great. You want to take the long, hard way? Doesn't matter. In the end, you're going to get there. Remember, the space, time, consciousness, dimension, time really doesn't matter. What's an extra 1,000,000 years or so for your soul, right? You want to suffer, you want to experience all these things over and over again? Go for it. Maybe it'll make you a better person. Needless to say, the Torah teaches us not to do that. It says it's not the smartest thing. So understand now the way of energy, the reality of the entities around us, why we don't mess with them, what the true meaning of light and darkness is, the balance and the harmony, the proper expression of things. I don't want to wax all Kabbalah, mystical, magical to you to go ooh and ah without bringing it right down here. Remember we said resurrection? Bringing it down here. The light doesn't just go up, it must come back down. You must always have balance. Everything rotates, revolves around that balance. So bring it down to the reality of your existence and make it real. When you do that and your energy aligns, you will then be able to experience naturally our consciousness and everything around. Even though you go up the ladder, you can still look to the sides, see what's out there, not necessarily having to go visit. That's how you gain experience with these things. And that is knowledge. And that is truth. And that's KosherTorah. I'm going to conclude on that note. God bless you all. Thanks for listening in. Ariel Tzadok here from the KosherTorah School. I'll see you all in our next class. Take care. Shalom.